Hi, friends. Host Eric here, host Talking with Famous People. And I'm struck by the inclination here at the beginning of 2018 to comment a little bit about and on the state of American democracy. When Hillary and Trump were running against one another, I uh, I didn't vote for the first time in many years. Maybe the first time ever. I didn't vote in a presidential election because obviously there's no point in validating a system that produces those two candidates. Was my thinking on that. Trump, as has been written by many people, poses a unusual challenge to the constitutional democracy insofar as he seems to have very little regard for any of the constraints on power, checks and balances built into the constitutional democracy, and that's not necessarily inherently totalitarian nightmare ensues. I'll get to that a little bit, but it certainly indicates that this is where this is the state of the government itself, in some sense, the federal government. To the extent that the federal government is being run or led, the executive branch is being directed and executed by somebody who has no regard whatsoever for the protocols or habits of democracy, as de Tocqueville would say, obviously undermines the legitimacy of the government as a whole, because there's no reason to take seriously anything the federal government does if the president doesn't take any of the protocols seriously and thinks that his will is the rule of law. So there are a lot of problems with the status quo, obviously. I'm not a huge Trump basher because my whole point is the other status quo wasn't much better. In which people were fighting hard to believe in this thing called government that was going to do this and that and the other thing and solve this problem and that problem and the other problem. Well, there's no disputing that there's a role for government. I'm not an anarchist. I believe that the government's role is to protect people's rights. I believe the government's role is to provide a few basic infrastructure services that are required. And I additionally think one of the government's roles is to enforce environmental regulations. After all, it would make sense that there's not really anybody else who... I am familiar with Quora, Mike. Thank you. I used to write on Quora a fair amount, but I still do occasionally make videos in response to Quora questions. The thing about this is we need a practical shepherd to guide us to a post-centralized federal government model. And we're necessarily going to move into that, as I think to any reasonable person it becomes increasingly ridiculous that this federal government that's just supposed to sort of referee the interaction of the 50 states with each other has become this behemoth that seizes over a third of the average working person's income in the name of their own retirement. That's bloated with massively ineffective programs of all manner and sort, and that is vastly overstepping the bounds that was prescribed by the framers of the Constitution, by anybody who's got any sense about them, and by the average American. The average American doesn't believe they need the federal government in his or her life. Who does? Well, who says I want the federal government here to do this and that and the other thing for me? I don't meet those people. They don't talk to me. I don't know. Nobody comes to me and say, I'm the one. I'm the one who wants the federal government to do everything for me. Anyhow, goodbye, Mike. My point is not to complain about the status quo. My point is to say that I am, of course, running for president. I'd like to run for president in 2020. I think there's a certain urgency, a need for a rational person who can actually shepherd the country from a position of knowledge, restraint, humility, and logic, and an embrace of discourse as well. The thing is, what I'm going to be bringing to the American presidency is, first and foremost, restraint. I am not there to exercise shit tons of power. I'm there to constrain the government back to its normal uses of power, its proper uses of power, its effective uses of power, its meaningful uses of power. I'm not an ideologue. I'm not going to cut anybody's, precious government cheese if I can catch something else first. The thing is, if you want government, seek it from your local government, where you have control, where you have say, where you get the government you want, potentially at least. Don't give more power to the state and then even more to the federal. It's an upside down pyramid. I understand there are instances where the federal government has come in and successfully constrained state and local governments from rights violations and other abhorrent misuses of law. I think that's absolutely an appropriate scope of federal authority when it's utilized properly. What we see, though, in the current circumstance is that these things are always necessarily, first and foremost, observer-driven. They're driven by the person who is making the decisions. They're driven by Trump. They're driven by Congressman whomever, Congresswoman whomever. These people all believe in what they're saying. Well, what makes you any different, Eric? Well, I believe in what I'm saying. I believe in humility and restraint, an acknowledgement that I can't predict the future, that I don't know all the actual impacts of a given prospective action, that the course of action to take is one that ought see the government as an entity doing less, not more. I'm not entirely an isolationist, but at the same time, I want to see us certainly not dropping bombs in other people's countries for particularly any reason, frankly. I mean, unless they attack us, and then it's going to have to be a nation. If we're dealing with terrorists, then terrorists need to be called what they are, which is international criminals, international violent criminals. They don't deserve a special class of thing. We're going to put away all the rhetorical nonsense as well. All the war on terror out the window. No more war on terror. We're not using that kind of ridiculous language anymore. It's absolutely insane. It causes the entire populace to behave as though we're at war with somebody. With whom? Terror? ISIS? Al-Qaeda? Please. Those are not entities that a nation state goes to war with. Those are international criminals. If somebody wants to go to war with ISIS, let Iraq go to war with ISIS. Let Iran go to war with ISIS. Let's let Saudi Arabia go to war with ISIS. I don't want anything to do with ISIS. So, does that sound sensible to everybody in America? I am running for president, and I would like your vote. And unlike the current administration, every other administration you're going to get, I will sit here and answer all your questions. I will answer them all. I will answer all the media's questions. They want to know what I'm going to do with this, what I'm going to do with that, how I'm going to approach this, how I'm going to approach that, what I think about this, that, the other thing. I know it all. I'll answer all the questions. I'll tell you everything. I'm not going to lie to you. I have no reason to. The thing that will get me elected president is because I have the best ideas, and I'm telling you the truth, and I'm obviously a sensible person with a good head on his shoulders. So, vote for me, host Eric, president. You're going to see a lot of clips of me saying a lot of crazy shit. It's okay. Just let that stuff slide. Everybody says crazy shit occasionally. Just look at Trump. He's president. There's nothing but say crazy shit. You gotta say a little crazy shit occasionally. Otherwise, you're just not qualified to be president. Aw, man. Pass the goose. Thanks for chicken. Whatever.